Welcome to Persons of Interest, a podcast featuring interviews with interesting people doing interesting things, diving into careers, personal stories, life lessons, and more. Here's your host, Derrick Dockett.
Thank you guys for listening to the Persons of Interest podcast. Really appreciate you taking time to download and listen. If you ever have a guest suggestion or a topic suggestion, please let me know. Shoot me a tweet at @DDockett. Talking about something different. I'm not working in the college space, as many of my listeners know anymore, but this longtime friend of mine that I've known on Twitter for such a long time, he is actually diving in with 2 feet into the name, image, and likeness space. And I'm really curious to get some background on what his project is and where that's going, what the future might hold, and just what's been going on with him. Pleased to bring in Tariq Ahmad. It's been a while since we had the chance to talk, man.
Man, it's been a very long time. Yeah, as you mentioned, we've been connected on Twitter for 10 plus years.
At least,
which makes me feel very old. Older. Yeah. But yeah, we've been connected. We've chatted so much over the years, and yeah, it's good to reconnect and hear more about you. And yeah, excited to talk about NIL.
I think we go back to old Google Plus days, right?
I don't know if your younger listeners are going to know what that is, but yeah, that was like 2010, 2009. That was a long time.
Yeah. So. I think when I first got to the Missouri Valley, which I started in October of 2010, that's when all that was going on. And I was getting my feet wet in that college athletics, college sports, social media space, that hashtag SM sports world. You were in that space. You just led a lot of the conversations. I remember seeing so much of that stuff with you, Pam Schvatkin. We would just go back and forth on just trends. This is before you could even tweet a GIF, tweet graphics. People were just trying to figure out what was going on there. That world has changed so much. We mentioned we're older, but social media, we don't know what Elon's going to do with Twitter tomorrow. Facebook's gone in different routes. Instagram, TikTok is now a thing. TikTok wasn't a thing back then. And it's just interesting how digital media has changed, some ways for the better, some ways for the worse, depending on how you look at it. When you look back on all that, what's your reaction? What's your thought about how the space has changed over these years?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now you're like really jogging memory lane. Because you're right. Like when we first joined, you're right. There's no Instagram. There's no Snapchat. There was no TikTok. There was no Vine, which arguably.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about Vine.
Because I would say other than Twitter, Vine is probably my absolute favorite social media platform. Yeah. So for your listeners who don't know, essentially Vine was a company that let you create 6-second videos. That's all you got. 6-second videos, and they automatically looped. I know that Twitter loved the product so much they purchased Vine for $30 million and then integrated it into Twitter. So you could basically create a Vine video, upload it to Vine, cross-post it to Twitter, and it was great. And it was like the creativity of what people could do in 6 seconds blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it was great. Yeah. But I think the way that it's moved now, you see a lot more highlights, you see a lot more videos. As you mentioned, you couldn't post a GIF or a GIF, however you want to say it. It was just static images. You couldn't even post emojis for a while. Yeah. And then it's just really, it seems, from like when we started in 2010, 2011, it was very news-based, fact-based.
Yep.
You even see the smallest things like, whoa, was that a Twitter handle on national TV? It just blew your mind. Now you're just like, that's just part of the landscape.
Yeah.
Then, move very heavy into video. Now you're really moving Web 3.0, NFT, blockchain, crypto, all these things. And it's just the evolution of technology, Chat GPT, things like that. So it's great to see those things because it's as technology is advancing, like Twitter and all the social media spaces are keeping up with it as well. So it's honestly, we could talk again in 2 years and it'll be a complete different conversation from today.
Yeah. It's funny. You say all that, and I'm like, since I haven't 2 feet in the digital space, like as a one-man band that I would try to create content, like get a little bit not worried, and not even FOMO, because I don't feel like I'm missing out. But like, I got on TikTok and then I got off of TikTok, and I got on Instagram and got off on Instagram, and now I'm back on Instagram because I was trying to like streamline things. I never got off of Twitter. Twitter's my favorite, and most of my podcast listeners know that. I keep Facebook for people I know, close friends. I never got off that. But all these platforms that have come and gone. We didn't talk about, you mentioned Snapchat, but just there's so many other platforms coming and going. And now the Web 3.0, as you mentioned, with how AI and Chat GPT, all those things are coming to life. I saw a news story last night here on local news about how they're using AI. It's not just for like you're talking chat, like text based, but it's now becoming image based, graphic. It's just growing leaps and bounds. And I don't say I'm worried, but I wonder what happens with the creative types, like the humans that are behind the work. Is AI going to be creating so much content that we don't need an actual human body? Because I don't think I need AI to be doing these types of things. I love to see the creativity come out, because who else is going to do that type of stuff? That's the more curious thing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point you make. It's one of two ways, right? It's you're a creative and you're a graphic designer and you do all that great content. Is Chat GPT and AI coming for my job per se? Because you're right, like no matter how much technology advances, human beings build this and you always need people to do this. Then again, it's like people who aren't good graphic designers or good in content creators can now use Chat GPT. That kind of helps them along the way, and it boosts their maybe credibility even more. I know that from just playing around with it and seeing, it's like the information, and I hear this from a lot of people, is Chat GPT 100% accurate? No, but it's 60 to 80% accurate. It can give you like a good jump start on things. Right. I know that you used to work in the K-12 space. I'm a college sport management instructor. So now I have to worry about, are my students using Chat GPT for homework assignments?
Right.
Like, how am I going to be able to decipher this? So it's an interesting space. I think overall it's for the better. I think it's just the advancement of it. And I think, Chat GPT 4 or something came out pretty recently. Yeah, I'm interested to see the space. And again, like the way what humans have designed and what they continue to build is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that's the part where I say for the good, because these things aren't being built by themselves. They're being built by smart people. And that's the thing. You just hope that these tools are being used for good rather than things that they shouldn't be used for. So
exactly.
All right. So let's get the real reason I wanted to bring you on. As I sit here on my third screen, the NCAA tournament is on and it's March Madness as we record, but you are diving in to the name, image, likeness space yourself. Tell me about how you decided to get involved in this, and you got even a webinar you're going to be involved in, and how are you educating yourself and then in turn educating others about what's going on in the NIL. Sorry, I get the NLI signing day all thrown in there, the name, image, likeness space. How are you getting involved in that, educating yourself to in turn educate others?
Yeah, no, great questions. I think we'll take it back even to before we even met. In 2008, I was working on a master's degree in sport management, and my final thesis was pay for play. So it was, I think that student athletes should be paid no matter what sport you play, no matter how big your school is. And here's how I would divvy it up. Basically, I think I wrote like, okay, let's create super conferences, and then we'll use TV revenue to distribute some funds to the student athletes. So like half of that came right with all the super conferences, but now it's legislation had come through. And so I'd always been pretty interested in that. Most recently, I was at Meta, formerly Facebook. So for the listeners, Meta owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and some other platforms as well. So big company, pretty sure everyone uses it. On that team, I didn't work specifically on the sports team, but I did have some connections there from previous relationships, and I was able to connect with that team on a initiative they were working on called NIL Empower 2.0. So essentially, it was the second variation of their name, image, likeness, Empower initiative that focused on women student athletes. Because research and data has shown that 75% of the deals go to male student athletes, whether it's the number of deals or the monetary amount, and women are not given as many opportunities. So Meta saw this as a good opportunity to say, let's really focus on the women student athletes and give them NIL education and branding and deals and access to doors that weren't open for them before, and post-career education, et cetera. So I worked with them on some marketing operations aspects of it, and it really like re-triggered my interest for NIL college space. And honestly, from that point, I just went to LinkedIn and I just started typing in NIL, name, image, likeness. I saw people in the space, connected with them and said, hey, interested in chatting with you, want to learn more about you, want to learn more about NIL. I spent the last 3 months or so doing that. I've connected with 40, 50 different people. And then my work at Meta ended December 30th, 2022. So I now realized, hey, this is a good opportunity for me to just go full on into the space. I think at that point, I had to realize, see, what am I good at, and specifically to NIL. So the two routes I'm going are, one is an NIL education route. So essentially, I'm putting on an NIL fundamentals webinar, completely free. Maybe Derrick, I'll give you the link afterwards if you want to share with viewers. Yeah, completely free. It is 2 weeks from today. So Thursday, March 30th, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll talk about what is NIL, how to maximize your name, image, likeness, a sample deal, all those things. I'm actually a certified athlete agent now in New York State. So any New York State listeners, if you need some NIL/marketing representation, please let me know. And I'm going to be starting an NIL newsletter. I'll probably drop the first one Monday. I think it's good timing coming off of March Madness that will focus on NIL trends and content and everything. And yeah, just really trying to go just full on into the space. It's funny, we talked about TikTok. Like, I actually joined TikTok for the first 2 months ago, and I've been doing like NIL videos, just basic phone in front of my face, and just like making videos and just trying to get content out there. So just trying to keep that moving forward. And I've been a guest speaker on some other podcasts to talk about NIL and sports marketing. So yeah, that's where I am today. So again, just really trying to put the push on NIL education and really share that. And then to the last part of your question, how am I educating myself? Again, it's a Twitter, which is interesting. I go on Twitter, I follow certain accounts, I follow certain brands. On3 is a big one that I follow. So on3.com/NIL. They basically have great writers. They have content up every day, which, because the space is such a wild west, there's no shortage of information and news. So it's basically just all these deals popping up. And now it's March Madness, as you mentioned, you're watching on your third screen. Like, I think more and more deals are going to start popping up. So usually a lot of that, just a lot of Twitter searches, a lot of Google searches, and just staying up on it. And it's basically like one of the first things I do in the morning, like 15 to 30 minutes, scour the news. What are the new deals for the day? Who said what? Who's bashing NIL, who loves NIL, and everything in between. So that's the best way to keep up with it, just like we used to back in the day on Twitter.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned using LinkedIn, because I can't tell you how many times I've told young adults, high school, college age, that ask, how do you get connected with people? Send a professional note, hey, I'm just interested in this. And I told them 70% of the time, they will say, hey, yeah, absolutely love to connect with you. Right now I'm busy, but hey, here's info, stay connected. I'll be happy to chat with you when I have some free time. And people will respond to that. You do it in a professional manner. So you are the case study for the NIL version of being able to do that. Okay, so you mentioned you spend your time going out there connecting with search on Twitter and online. What's been the one thing? Because when most people think about this stuff, they think of the student athlete at XYZ State University and them getting a deal with the local auto shop or the local restaurant, and they can use their likeness to help sell product in ads. So I'm Derrick Dockett, and I'm a student athlete at such and such university in Missouri. And hey, I just signed a deal with the burger joint down the road, and I'm going to be spokesman for them. They're going to pay me XYZ dollars, yada, yada. That's what most people think about. Yeah. It can be so much more than that.
Yeah.
What has been the one thing that has surprised you that you've learned in everything that's taken in since you've been educating yourself?
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway for me is some of the size of these deals is crazy. Like, because NIL became legal July 1st, 2021. I'm like, no way any student athlete gets over $5,000. No way. And like the first day, companies are signing athletes for $25,000, $50,000, $75,000. And it's wild to think about that amount. But then in the other turn, it's sometimes people don't realize, I guess something surprising me is like, you don't realize how small some of the deals are. As I think Open Doors, which is a big marketplace, Influencer, which is another big one, they've shared their data and research, and the average deal amount through their platforms is like $60.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty, I don't know about you, D2, but man, if I had an extra $60 a month when I was an undergrad, I'd be rich. I'd be like, yeah, Mom, you don't have to cook dinner. We're going to Chili. But $60, it's gas in your car for a couple weeks, food from the grocery store, cell phone bill. So I think that's actually been the most surprising thing, is just the amount of deals, whether it was that big or whether it's that small, and like really how it all comes together. Because you're still providing value, as you mentioned, for the company, for the burger joint, for the smoothie place, whatever, and you just really go from there and see where it is. I think another angle that really surprised me is the the abundance of collectives that have taken on. Essentially, for your audience, basically what a collective is, it's a group of donors who are not officially associated with the university who can basically pay student athletes. So it's nice because they can collect large amounts of money and they can distribute them to athletes. Exactly. Yeah. So it's, hey, you're a preferred walk-on, but you don't have a scholarship? No problem. We'll give you $25,000 a year, which covers all your costs. That's interesting too, because it's the marketplaces like the Open Doors and the Influencer, and these are paying out a specific amount. But the vast majority of those payments are coming from collectives because you're seeing the 25,000, the 50,000, the six-figure deals. So I think the growth and the abundance of the collectives has really been pretty surprising as well.
And I'm not sure that's one part of it that people saw coming. Most folks thought it'd be the local restaurant, the chain, the business that was going to be doing a lot of this. But it's the alumni base, the folks that are, like you mentioned, not tied to the university, and bringing together the groups and being able to fund. And that part is interesting to me. I just was reading, there's more and more of these popping up now outside of the Power Five. You're looking at the schools that are the smaller, like the Missouri type schools, the small conference schools, where they are finally trying to get their ducks in a row, like this year, trying to keep up with the Joneses. And they're saying, all right, we've got a group of alumni that are wanting to keep this train going. And hey, while we can't do what this school's doing, we can do it in a different kind of way. And I think that brings to the fact that the Open Doors, those types of groups that are there to support directly the student athlete, these alumni groups, these collectives being able to do their part.
Yeah.
On that point, though, how does the NCAA, and this is the elephant in the room, the regulation of all this, because here's a question for you. You might know this. Is it okay for a collective to go out to a corporation and ask them for funds that they use to share with student athletes? I'm sure if they're not tied in, if they make the ask and they get the money, so be it. Is that okay? And how does the NCAA keep all this stuff? And I don't even know if they're doing a good job of it right now. It's Wild West, as you mentioned earlier, but what role will they play to keep all this stuff, quote unquote, under control?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when the NCAA approved NIL, they were very loose with it intentionally because I think they had over-governed it for so many years. It was just, okay, let's give you a few rules. It's you can't do this, you can't do this, you can do this, that, and the other, and then that's it. And then you go off and do whatever you want. I think the collectives really took advantage of that. I think from your question, I can't 100% say for sure, but it would make sense, right? Because if it's okay, collective A wants to partner with car dealership B to promote athlete C, that's the tie-in, because it's like now the car dealership can say we're part of this collective, and then the collective can feed the car dealership athletes to come do promos or give them demo cars and all that. So I don't think there's an issue with that, but I'm sure there's probably some legality there. And I think the interesting thing is like there's no federal law, and I know that's been a thing too. It's like the new NCAA president, Charlie Baker, has been coming in talking about NIL. I believe the House committee is going to hear about NIL this week and make a decision. And from following very lawyer NIL attorneys on Twitter, a lot of them are saying that federal law really isn't necessary in these cases. So it's like, even if there's not a federal law, that's okay, but they just want guidance. That's all it is. It's like the NCAA. If you can go state by state, as long as it doesn't override NCAA law or federal law, you can keep it as the thing. It's interesting where this space is going to go in the next few months, as with the legal battles, what exactly is going to do. But if a federal law comes down, I think that's fine, but I think it has to be fair for everyone. And to me, most importantly, it shouldn't take money away from the student athletes. Like, to me, I'm all in, to use a phrase that kids use these days, as, hey, get your bag. If student athletes can keep getting their bag and even federal law doesn't touch that, like, I'm all in for that, as long as it's fair for everyone and it touched the pockets of the student athletes.
Yeah. So I think most folks thought this would be able to give student athletes across the board, no matter where they were in school, quote unquote, opportunities. Yeah. But as we know, the rich sort of get richer, and the Alabamas of the world. We can be honest here. It all starts with college football. And I'm sure in your research, you've probably seen the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, AC, those Power 5 football programs probably have student athletes that are making the most of this opportunity. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, and I hope you talk about that in your webinar, because I'd be curious to hear more about that, but mentioning how women female student athletes, equaling that playing field, because not just football, not just women, but the non-revenue sports. I've seen more and more schools start to roll out their own collectives and roll out, I should say, alumni basis, people tied in with schools, supporting schools, but schools themselves being partnered with organizations like Open Doors that you can say, hey, we've got a platform here. Go to this page. Here's our student athletes that are available. And you mentioned that $60, like the dollar amounts aren't like outlandish numbers. Like they're much lower than I would expect. But it's interesting seeing that, but not just for the football, the visual and basketball, the soccer, the track and field, the cross country, the sand volleyball. I mean, it's across the board. I guess if the student athlete wants to be involved, they have the option to be involved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a great point you bring up. Because to me, it comes down to a couple of things. Like, one, let's be honest, like women are way better at social media content than us guys are. They're way more creative. They have better audiences. And like, you really should tap into that. And two, it's all about personality, because you could have the star quarterback on your team who has a personality of a wing. Like, it doesn't even matter. But then you have the last player on the water polo team who's only played like 6 minutes their whole career, but they have like good personality, they're charismatic, really creative content. That's where the value and the brands are. And it's just like you tap into that audience, and then they have that really unique audience that really loves that content. Yeah. And again, like I'm a real big proponent of making sure women student athletes are getting equal, like more opportunities, bigger deals, making sure that those doors are open for them, and just learning the process and having it. Because you're right. Unfortunately, I mean, it does start with football. Like everyone thinks, oh, Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, oh, like they get all these huge deals. That has to be the same for everybody else. But it's not. Like even their own teammates, some of them probably have no NIL deals, even though they start on the same team as those players. Yeah, again, it's like really putting that emphasis on the female student athletes. And because the key to me is, if I'm a brand, I want to sell as much as possible, right? So if I can tap into as many different audiences as possible, that's what I'm going to do. If I can sponsor a women's softball team, cool. I now have 25 new audiences I didn't have access to before. And they have, again, really engaging content, really loyal fan bases. You really got to tap into that, because there's a lost opportunity out there that brands really need to take advantage of. Yeah.
Last question for you. And this is one, you may not have the answer to this, but I'm just curious your thoughts. Is there, outside of the potential of mismanagement, negatives for a student athlete that would make them say, I don't want anything to do with this? On the surface, it's like, why would you not? Like, it's, this is an opportunity to quote unquote make money. But for some, like, there are tie-ins, like you may have to promote something on social media, do something, and some may be fine with that, some may not. The negatives, and I'm sure it's going to be a case-by-case basis. If you have a personality, you're going to be more comfortable doing it. If you don't, you're like, this is going to be cringeworthy, I've got to send this tweet. But I guess a reason for a student athlete to not be involved, do you foresee what would make someone be standoffish? And again, I know it's going to be probably case-by-case basis depending on the situation.
Yeah, great question. I think the main thing is that a lot of student athletes are probably getting slid into their DMs by a lot of slimy people. They don't know who to trust. It could just be like, hey, I'll work with you. Let me call you. Let's work something out. And like a lot of these people, whether they're agents or whoever, may not have the best interest of student athletes in mind. I think that could be a huge turnoff for some of these student athletes, or even in some cases, I'm really not interested. I've actually talked to either student athletes or NIL directors at schools, and a lot of them say, I talked to one student athlete, she's a basketball player at a Division I school. I said, oh, do all your teammates have NIL deals? She's like 75% of our team don't even care about NIL. That's only like 3 players on the whole team who even do anything with it. Wow. And I talked to someone at another school, mid-major school. She said, no, honestly, like there are a lot of our student athletes, like they don't care. They're like, hey, I'm here to play sports. I'm going to do my 4 years. My school's paid for. I'm graduating. Thank you for your time. And I'm out of here. Like they have no interest in it either, whether it's just they don't care about NIL. They have like really hard majors, electrical engineering or whatever it is. And
they are students.
They're actual students, student athlete. Right. Yeah. So yeah, I would say, to answer your question, I think a lot of student athletes would either be turned off. Again, I think just they don't know who to trust. And I think that comes down to the school, right? Like the school needs to have like proper education, proper coaching, proper guidance, proper compliance. And to me, the student athlete, the school should always be the first step into getting your knowledge. Go to your school. They should have that information for you, I think is the key. And I think also in a very roundabout way, I don't know if student athletes are thinking about this, but there's a chance that they could unknowingly enter an NIL deal that causes them to lose eligibility. That would be really terrible. So if I was part of a deal and a student couldn't play for one game or one season, like I would feel horrible about that. And again, it comes down to education, and student athletes may not be thinking about that, but I think that could be something too, where it's student athletes are very leery of it too. It's just like, hey, I'm just here for school. I'm just going to do what my team tells me to do. And then that's it. And I'm on my way. So I think those are probably a couple things that would keep student athletes away from it, other than just not being interested in it at all.
Are you running into schools that they have on staff NIL liaison, like positions that are helping guide student athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a lot of the bigger schools do. So you mentioned P5s, a lot of the Power 5s do, and a lot more mid-majors are coming up with that. But even then, I think you worked in college athletics. What are there, like 1,100 Division 1, 2, and 3 schools or something like that? But only 65 schools have NIL directors or
some sort of position. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, for that specific position. So it's such a small percentage of it. I am running into that where it's like a lot of schools have those directors and they're putting those education in place. But again, like 90% of us don't have anything, whether it's lack of interest, lack of education, lack of funding, things like that. And I've reached out to those schools to inquire about it. I haven't heard anything back, which I did actually speak to a professor at one school, and she said, oh, like our athletic department is such a mess. It's like, we're like have a new athletic director, and there's like too much bickering and politics. It's like NIL is like the last thing on our mind. Yeah. But yeah, to answer your question, there are schools that have like NIL directors or managers, but they're pretty few and far between for now.
Very interesting. Sir, tell them about this webinar you got coming up. You mentioned it's free. Give them how much whatever details you can about it, and then also share where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, so the webinar is coming up at the end of the month. So Thursday, March 30th, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern. It is called NIL Fundamentals. As you mentioned, completely free. There's no hitch to it. Just need your name, email address. There's no hidden credit card, anything. So this is good whether you're a student athlete, you're a parent of a student athlete, you're a coach, you're an athletic administrator, you know someone who's in the space, or even you're just interested in the space in general, that this is for you. So I'm going to be going over what exactly is NIL, what are some steps that you can take to maximize your name, image, and likeness. We'll go through a sample deal. Of course, there's Q&A at the end. We're always open to further conversations there. So yeah, Derrick, I'll send you the information for that. And I'm also posting it on my social. We mentioned Twitter, so you can follow me there at Tariq_Ahmad. So TARIQ_AHMAD. So that's probably the best place to follow me. I share a lot of news there, and I've been actually just recently started my own, what I call it Sports Court Consulting. So this is like my own NIL, like education, branding, and content, et cetera. So that is at _Sports Court, SPORTSCOURT. So that's on Twitter, and then that's on Instagram as well. So that is my content. So that's where all the information is there, whether you need registration link, if you want to contact me about NIL, that's where it is. So yeah, looking forward to the webinar. If you're able to join, it'd be great. And if your listeners are able to join, that is great too. And hopefully it'll be beneficial for you, and hopefully you learn something from it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Persons of Interest. This podcast is a personal project with the goal of sharing stories that might inspire others to create their own path. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a guest suggestion, you can reach Derrick on Twitter at @DDocket.
Hey everyone, this is Tariq Ahmad. Thank you very much for listening to the Persons of Interest podcast.